Hello everyone, today I'll be showing off the start of my retro orc army as well as painting up some orc bad moons to add to this force. These orcs here came out in 1990 and were part of a plastic multi-part kit. This kit came with a few different head options as you can see throughout this force. And these guys definitely do have some fun poses. This one right over here has to be my favorite. Besides these orc blood axes, we also have a looted predator tank. This tank was a mix of 3D printing parts and plexiglass used for the center of it. The banner on top was heavily inspired by old blood axe banners, and it was drawn by my girlfriend. One of the huge disadvantages of these looted vehicles is they have a ballistic skill of 5+, meaning the orc must roll a 5 or 6 to successfully hit a target. The orc forces are definitely coming along nicely, but no proper Waaagh is built with just one clan, so today we're bringing in the most yellow orcs around, the Bad Moons. These orcs came out in 1990 as part of the Space Crusade box set. Space Crusade was a collaboration between Games Workshop and Milton Bradley that was a simpler version of Warhammer's earlier board game Space Hulk. The box included Space Marines, Chaos Forces, Gene Stealers, and these phony plastic orcs. This guy here has been primed up with Vallejo White Airbrush Primer. Now for some flat yellow by Vallejo. We're going to make sure to do 2 thin layers to make sure it's applied consistently. For the next step, we'll be adding Ancient Honey Speed Paint from the Army Painter. The speed paint will be mixed 50-50 with water to turn it into a wash. We'll be using that wash to add depth to the armor. For the pauldrons, we will follow across the ridges. It does not matter if any gets onto the trim. We also want to make sure it's a consistent line and making sure not to flood one area. Taking that same 50-50 wash mix, we are going to apply it all over the torso, making sure it gets everywhere and into all the recesses. This will give the torso armor shadowing. I'll also add the wash to the orc's back as well. Once he is dry, we can see how the wash settles into the recesses of the orc's armor, helping to make the details pop. Using this mix is a very easy way to make yellow not look flat, as yellow usually will without extra shading or contrast. Next I'll be adding black, and we'll be using this for all the trim. And when doing the trim, you'll have to be very careful not to smudge onto the yellow. But as you can see, I picked out all the trim, the clothes, the axe, and his bolter. Now grabbing some Goblin Green by Vallejo, I'm going to use it to give him his orky skin. For the skin on this guy, I'm definitely going to want to do 2 coats to make sure it's smooth. Otherwise, there'll be streak lines that won't look good later on. This is how his skin looks once it's all picked out. The next step for the orc skin is to add a wash of the Army Painter Strong Tone. This will help with all of the shadows. Making sure not to let any pool in any of the flat areas, but if it does, we can definitely fix that later on. I'll also be adding some to his arms and hands as well. Once the wash is dry, we're going to crack out some Goblin Green to cover over any flat areas or any raised areas that may have had either pooling or were darkened too much. With his skin cleaned up, I'll take a 50-50 mix of flat yellow and Goblin Green. For the highlights, I'm going to add some to the tips of his ears, as well as his knuckles and any other major raised areas such as the chin, nose, and a bit to the top of his head. For the next color, I'll grab some Vallejo Dark Sand. We're going to use this to pick out the eyes as well as the teeth on the orc. But make sure to be careful not to get any into the recesses that we darkened with our wash. After that, we're going to grab ourselves some Vallejo Flat Brown. This is going to be used to pick out his boots as well as the handle for his axe. With having all the major areas now blocked in, we can start to truly get a feel for what he'll look like when he's done. Taking some Vallejo Carmine Red, we can pick out his eyes very, very carefully, as well as painting in his belt buckle. Once that red is all dry, this is how he looks. From here, all we have left is some highlights as well as his basing. Now I'm going to grab some Vallejo German Grey for the highlights on his weapons as well as any trim on his armor. We're going to take our brush and run it carefully across any of the raised areas on his gun. Though don't worry if it's a little bit thicker of a highlight. Also adding some to his knees as well as the trim on his pauldron. Here's how he looks after the first step of those highlights are done. And I do really like how his axe is turning out. For the next steps of highlights, we're going to be using Vallejo Neutral Grey. For these highlights, we're basically going to be adding smaller ones inside of the chunkier German Grey highlights. I will pick out spots for the eye to naturally go to, such as the muzzle of the gun, making sure to do the same on the other side, as well as a few other spots all around the gun. With all those highlights done, this is how the orc is looking. I really like how the axe and bolter are turning out. Now onto the highlights for the boots. We're going to use some Vallejo Saddle Brown. I'm going to make a C shape on the front around the laces, as well as a line for the toe of the boot. On the back of the boot, make sure not to get any into the dark recesses between the sole and the boot itself. I'll also grab the raised edge on the hand grenade as well as on the axe. Once that's all done, we're going to take some Army Painter Flesh Wash and apply it to the boots. This will give them a leathery feel and help to make the laces pop. With the wash all dry, all we have left to do is basing this guy. For that, we're going to grab some Elmer's School Glue. We're going to put one dot on the front, as well as one dot on the back. To spread out the glue, I'm going to go find a ratty old brush. Definitely don't use a nice one because this will ruin your brushes. Make sure to try to avoid his boots while spreading out the glue. Now to grab the tub of basing sand. Dunk the orc in and make sure to tap on the bottom to knock any loose debris off. Last video, I was recommended to use a toothpick instead of an X-Acto knife in the comments. So I want to thank that commenter, and this definitely worked a lot better than using the knife, especially because it's a lot smaller. But now we're going to want to take our toothpick and make sure to move any sand that is stuck to the boots. From here, I'm going to grab some black and go around the entire rim of the base. Once that was done, I did notice I missed a spot on his gun, so I'm going to go grab some Bloody Red by Vallejo and dry brush it onto the face on his gun. With that last finishing detail done, this is how our finished Ork Bad Moon looks. With that, let's add this orc to the rest of the mob. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for all the support on the last video. It really does mean a lot. If you have any hobby advice or ideas for future videos, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I am planning on uploading a new video every week for the rest of the summer, so there's plenty more Warhammer content to come. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.